All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are diving headfirst into a story that's like a crazy mix of tech, privacy, and enough international intrigue to make your head spin.
Yeah, it's wild
It
one.
all revolves around Pavel Durov,
Right.
the guy behind the messaging app Telegram.
Uh-huh.
And let me tell you, he's found himself in some seriously hot water recently.
Definitely a case study for the books. This whole thing with Durov really highlights that battle we're seeing more and more these days between individual privacy and national security, especially with, the world becoming more interconnected by the day.
Absolutely. This is giving me major spy thriller vibes. But okay, before we get lost in all the conspiracy theories and whatnot, let's back up for a second to get back to basics.
Sure.
Who is Pavel Durov?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really fit your typical Silicon Valley tech bro stereotype, does he?
Not one bit. Durov is, well, he's kind of an enigma,
Right.
known for being very private, almost to the point of being reclusive, really. And he lives a pretty simple life from what we know. Values freedom and privacy above everything else.
So not your typical lavish tech CEO lifestyle.
No, not at all. I mean, there are stories about him throwing money out of his office window back when he was in St. Petersburg.
Wait, what? Throwing money? Like literally out the window?
Yeah, but not in like a showy way, more like he was making some kind of statement about, I don't know, wealth or something.
Okay, now that's not something you see every day. What do you think he was trying to say by doing that?
I honestly don't know. It's a head scratcher for sure, but I guess it tracks with what people say about him, like how he's a minimalist and how he's really against the idea of just consuming more and more stuff.
Interesting. So this is a guy who definitely dances to the beat of his own drum, that's for sure. And it seems like that independent streak of his, it's kind of at the core of his whole story, especially when you look at what went down with VK, his first big project.
Oh, absolutely. So before Telegram, you had VK, VKontakte, it was called, basically Russia's answer to Facebook. And it was massive. I mean, a huge success story. But then things took a turn when the Russian government came knocking and demanded user data.
Hold on, are we talking about the government demanding that he just hand over information that could put his users at risk?
Yep, you got it. Specifically, they wanted data on anyone who was involved in protests against the government.
Wow, that's some real pressure. So what did Durov do? Cave to the demands?
Nope. Flat out refused. He saw it as a direct attack on his users' privacy, a line he wasn't going to cross. But that decision, it came with some serious consequences, let me tell you.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
You don't just say no to the Russian government and walk away unscathed.
Exactly. He faced tons of pressure, threats, even a brief detention if you believe some of the reports. Eventually, it got to be too much. He decided to sell his stake in VK and get out of Russia, feared for his safety.
Wow. So this wasn't just a business decision then, was it? This was Durov putting his principles, his belief in privacy, ahead of his own personal gain, even if it meant leaving behind a massively successful company and his home country. That's a bold move.
Yeah, he definitely put his money where his mouth was. And you can really see how that whole experience with VK, how it completely shaped the way he approached Telegram.
Right.
It's almost like he designed it to be the anti-VK, this digital fortress where user privacy was the #1 priority no matter what. But, as we'll get into, that whole unwavering commitment to privacy, well, while it sounds good on paper, it might have also, maybe unintentionally, made Telegram a target for some unwanted attention.
Oh, I bet. It's like that old saying, right? One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah.
Or in this case, one man's digital sanctuary is another man's breeding ground for something more sinister.
It's funny you should put it like that because it really is a double-edged sword, this whole thing with Telegram. I mean, you're right, Durov built it from the ground up with privacy as the foundation.
Right.
I mean, you name it. End-to-end encryption, disappearing messages, secret chats. Telegram had it all. And on the one hand, it was brilliant, right? Users could basically communicate however they wanted without having to worry about someone listening in. But
There's always a but, right?
yeah, on the other hand, those same features, they made it incredibly hard to track down the bad guys, the ones using the platform for, well, let's just say less than legal activity.
Okay, so we're talking about like organized crime rings
Mhm.
using it to coordinate their operations. Or even worse, those disturbing reports of child exploitation networks using these privacy features to operate under the radar.
Yeah, all of that. And the thing is, these weren't just isolated incidents either. Law enforcement agencies all over the world, they were starting to sound the alarm about Telegram, saying it was becoming this haven for criminal activity, shielded from all the usual ways they had to investigate.
Wow, that puts Durov in a really tough spot. Like, he's built this entire platform on the idea of protecting users no matter what.
Mm.
But at the same time, the technology he's created, it's being used to do some truly horrible things. Talking about a
Yeah.
dilemma.
Yeah, a real tightrope walk, morally speaking. And it all played out very publicly. Governments, organizations all around the world, they piled on the pressure, demanding that Durov start doing more to moderate content on Telegram.
I can only imagine. They were probably arguing that by not taking down this content, he was essentially enabling it, making him at least partly responsible for what was happening on his platform.
Pretty much. Their stance was that this whole absolute privacy thing, it was irresponsible, even dangerous. But Durov, at least publicly, he wouldn't budge. He was sticking to his guns on this one.
So he was basically saying, privacy is privacy, end of story, even if that means protecting the bad guys.
Yeah, essentially. His whole thing was that if you start compromising on privacy, even for what seem like good reasons, well, you're setting a dangerous precedent. You create a backdoor for law enforcement, what's stopping someone else with bad intentions from exploiting it, right? To him, the risk of abuse was too great.
I can see his point. It's that slippery slope argument, right? You start making exceptions. Where do you draw the line? Who gets to decide what content is okay and what isn't? It's a tough one.
No easy answers there. But here's the thing. Even with all of that, there were some, well, let's just say interesting developments happening behind closed doors. Remember when Telegram got blocked in Russia back in 2018?
Oh, yeah. That was huge.
Yeah.
It was because Durov refused to give the Russian government the encryption keys, right? He basically told them to take a hike.
That's the one. But here's the kicker. The ban was lifted a couple years later in 2020, and nobody really knows why. Officially, they never gave a clear reason.
So what? Did they just change their minds? After years of demanding access, they just decided it wasn't a big deal anymore.
That's what's so strange about all of this. Some people think that maybe, just maybe, Telegram agreed to play ball with the Russian government on some level, like maybe they were helping them identify and take down terrorist content or something.
So behind all the tough talk about privacy, maybe Durov was making deals with the Kremlin. Okay, now this is getting really interesting.
Right. It's like we're adding another layer to this whole thing. We've got privacy, we've got national security, and now we're throwing in possible backroom deals with the Russian government.
Yeah, talk about muddy waters. And as if this whole thing couldn't get any juicier, you've got Durov's arrest in Paris in August of 2024.
Oh, yeah. And the timing of that whole thing, let's just say it raised a few eyebrows. Just a few days before his arrest, Durov was spotted in Azerbaijan.
Hang on a sec. Isn't that where Putin just happened to be at the same time?
You got it. Same place, same time. You think that's just a coincidence?
Come on, what are the chances? This is starting to feel less like a tech story and more like a scene straight out of a spy thriller. So what was Durov's trip to Azerbaijan some kind of power play? Was he there to negotiate something and his arrest was a way to, I don't know, throw a wrench in the works?
Now, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some sources are saying that maybe Durov was trying to work out some kind of deal, maybe about Telegram's future in Russia, maybe even access to user data. We just don't know.
Okay, so we've got potential backroom deals, international intrigue. This is getting good. But then, just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder, another player enters the scene. Yulia Vavilova.
Ah, yes, Yulia Vavilova. Now, she is an interesting character, to say the least.
Okay, so before we got sidetracked by all of this, talk of international espionage and mysterious trips to Azerbaijan, you were about to tell us about Yulia Vavilova
Right. Yulia
and
Vavilova.
how she fits into all of this.
So Vavilova, she's a social media influencer.
Right.
And she was seen, get this, with Durov in both Paris and Azerbaijan
No way.
right before his arrest. And let's just say
Yeah.
there are some rumors, shall we say, that she's not just your average Instagram model.
Okay, you got to give me more than that. What do you mean?
Well, word on the street is she might have ties to some intelligence agencies.
Hold on. Are we saying the social media influencer might actually be some kind of spy?
We're saying that some people believe that to be the case.
Wow. Okay, this is getting a little too much for me even.
Right. And nobody knows exactly what those ties are, like
Oh,
how
yeah.
deep they go.
Right.
But it has led to this whole theory that maybe, just maybe, she was involved in keeping tabs on Durov, maybe even running a, what do they call it, a honeypot operation.
Like on purpose. Like she was deliberately sent to get close to him for some kind of, I don't know, intelligence agency.
That's the theory going around.
I don't even know what to say to that. This is insane.
And it really throws this whole debate about online privacy, about surveillance, it throws it all into sharp relief.
Right.
You've got Durov, a guy who basically built his entire empire on the idea that people should be in control of their own data, that privacy is a fundamental right. And then you have this arrest,
Right.
which suggests that even someone like him, with all of his resources, all of his commitment to protecting user data, even he's not untouchable.
It's kind of terrifying when you really think about it. If someone like Durov can get caught in this web of, I don't even know, international intrigue, what hope does the average person have? Are any of us truly safe from this kind of surveillance?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, regardless of how this whole Durov thing shakes down,
Right.
it really does expose how fragile online privacy actually is, especially in a world where governments and all these powerful entities are becoming more and more sophisticated when it comes to tracking us online.
It's a scary thought. So where do we go from here? What can we even do about it? It feels like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place,
Yeah.
We want security, but we also want our freedom.
Yeah, that's the dilemma, isn't it? If there were easy answers, this wouldn't be such a fascinating case, would it? This whole situation with Durov, regardless of what actually went down, it forces us to face some hard truths about the digital age we live in.
It really does make you think.
How much are we willing to sacrifice for a little bit of privacy? How much are we willing to compromise? It's a question we all have to grapple with, and there's no simple answer.
No easy answers, that's for sure. Well, that about wraps it up for this week's deep dive into the wild world of Pavel Durov, Telegram, and the price of privacy in the digital age.
I think we all need a drink after this one.
Seriously. And maybe a tinfoil hat or two. Until next time, stay curious out there, everyone.